Um, Fortunately, these chapters were not terribly long, so I like that.
Hmm.
And as far as length of the book goes, we are almost done. I was thinking maybe next time we'll just combine all three chapters just to close out the book and start thinking about the next one.
Cool.
Yep, that's my plan. Um, all right. So this talks about like three methods for working with chaos, which two I was kind of familiar with, one I wasn't. Um, I appreciated where she starts the chapter of we practice to liberate ourselves from a burden, the burden of a narrow perspective caused by craving, aggression, ignorance, and fear.
Coffee.
And Max.
Liberate yourself from that, said the Buddha.
Yeah, nice. I'm glad you've achieved coffee times. Coffee times are pretty good usually, unless I drink too much coffee, then my heart palpitates. I have high blood pressure problems, so I probably shouldn't drink as much coffee as I do. Um, I liked this line. It was just kind of cute and whimsical, which was the earth seems to be beseeching us to connect with joy and discover our innermost essence.
All right, I'm gonna poke at this.
I think that was just cute. I just liked it as a line.
What do you take innermost essence to mean?
Um, gosh, now you're gonna make me figure out how to word it. The In actuality, as I like really think about the teachings and what I think about them, my innermost essence is not a thing itself, but the essence of knowing there is no separation between me and everything else. Anyway, but that's a whole other thing. You get inside yourself just to realize there is no inside yourself. But that's
Yeah. Then you have to sit there and say, so what was looking inside of ourselves? And we just sat there in this self-referential puzzle and fall apart.
yeah, which I feel like she talks about a little bit in I think it's the next chapter.
Mm.
Um So she says the first method is no more struggle. And I'm like, great advice. Just don't struggle. Got it. It says she talks about effectively, let's see. This instruction applies to working with unpleasantness. Um, we, whatever or whoever arises, um, train again and again and looking at it and seeing it for what it is without calling it names, without hurling rocks, and without averting your eyes. And I think that that's an important practice because so much comes up, I think, when we do sit and spend time meditating or reflecting. And I know I absolutely I want to name it, I want to categorize it, I want to file it in the nice neat boxes of my mind.
Hmm.
Because I that's how I do. That's how I want it to be. And so um, yeah, I think that she's got a point of that's part of what we gotta do with the chaos, right? We can't try to make it not chaotic. We gotta let it
No.
be what it is. Sorry, I hear my son in the other room. Um, it's like inviting. It's like inviting what scares us to introduce itself and hang around for a while. I think we've talked a lot about facing the things that scare us, right? That's been a common topic that comes up a lot, I think, when we talk on Sundays. Things come up, they scare us, whether it's the scariness of like emotions we don't want to face, memories, realities. A lot of things scare us.
I mean, I haven't been here with the other um, sessions, but even in general in the Sangha, a lot of the posting is kind of, hey, this thing happened and I don't know what to do about it,
I don't
or,
know. Yeah.
yeah, this is scary, help. um,
Help.
it's
Help.
exactly, yeah, like recently I was sat getting really wound up about someone supposedly kind of taking advantage of me trying to, help them out. And I'm sat there like, on the one hand, you know, like it's a thing, and boundaries are important and useful. On the other hand, like I'm sat looking at this Buddhist notion of who they're taking advantage of,
Mhm.
and kind of sitting there over and over again in a loop about it, and it's bizarre that something that can take up your entire morning when you sit with it and look at it in the right way, you can just go, actually, it's not a problem. Bye.
Ah.
Yeah, it's like, couldn't you have done that earlier?
Mhm. For sure.
It's a quite nice little quote there. As I don't know how to say it, Milarepa um, sang to the monsters he found in his cave. It is wonderful you demons came today.
Mm. Mhm. Hmm. It's very poetic. I do like that.
It is.
I like the poetry of it. Um, and then she talks about the second method of the chaos, which I think if you've done any study into Buddhism, you kind of probably recognize that phrase of using poison as medicine, or at least I've come across it a couple times to recognize it. I don't know
I haven't, so please explain.
if. um, so if you dive a lot, I guess, into different little Buddhisty things, what ends up coming up is the discussion of the three poisons,
Mm-hmm.
which she lists them here for us, which is passion, aggression, and ignorance. Your passion can also include things like cravings or addiction, right? Things we're passionate about. I think sometimes we boil a passion down to only a more simplistic or a smaller range of choices, but it is a lot of things. Anyway, so she describes these three passions for us, and the way she encourages us to approach the chaos is to take those poisons and make them into the medicine we use to the fix the situation or work with the situation. So like when suffering arises, the Tonglen instruction is to breathe in for everybody. I think we take that passion and try to redirect it in a way that is compassionate. And so, in one of the other books we read by Pema Chodron, she really talks about the Tonglen practice, which, of the things we've read by her, I'll say has probably stuck with me the most. Tonglen and Maitri practice has stuck with me the most as something to bring into my day to day life. And so, it's this idea of slowly, not all at once, expanding your sense of compassion for the world, right? We can start with the things that are easy. We start with
Mm-hmm.
the things like I obviously love my cat. I love food. I love my husband, right? Like I start with these things and breathing in compassion for them. And then I can slowly extend my compassion not only to them, but to the people who I feel apathetic about, and then to the people who I might even actively dislike. And so it's this practice of slowly getting to that point of there are no boundaries to my compassion. I feel it for all things, you know?
Sounds a little like meta meditation.
Yeah, I think that's another word for it, and it just kind of depends on where you're getting your teachings and what phrases you're going to hear associated with it, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so, as I've been doing a lot of readings with Pema Chodron, just because I've picked a couple of her books in a row because people keep not voting, and if I'm going to pick my book, I have enjoyed her writing. And so, she calls it the Tonglen process, the Tonglen practice, which I think actually might have its origins in the Tibetan words. I grain of salt. I don't actually remember, but um, so I highlighted here. We breathe it in for everybody. This poison is not just our personal misfortune, our fault, our blemish, or shame. It's part of the human condition. And so I think what it ultimately is a practice of empathy, right? It's teaching you how to be empathetic from baby steps, which I think is delightful and gets into my whole like passion for the correlate combination of correlation and overlap that we see with cognitive behavioral therapy and Buddhism frequently. When people are actively following the practice, it is amazing to me how much of this is therapeutic. and how much of this can really bring a lot of healing to somebody who I think is pursuing it with an open mind and who has the right support system to navigate it. Um, and I love that about it, about the practice.
Yeah, if you look at how, like, especially in some Zen groups, the relationship you have with a teacher can be almost like that of a therapist. You
Mhm.
just go to them as like, oh, teacher, I'm wound up about this. I know I'm clinging to this, that, the other. It's still peeing me off. What can I do about it?
It's beating me up.
Actually, I think it's interesting that you said empathy there, because
Mhm.
usually when people say empathy, it is in relation to somebody else is going through a struggle and you're not at the moment, or you're not feeling it at that moment. Like, you're not struggling actively, even
Mhm.
if you may have in the past.
Right.
Usually, when we say, oh, you have to have empathy for this person, oh, it's because they're struggling. But in this case, you're using it as like the primary sufferer. The we're starting from the center. The
Mhm.
primary sufferer is the self, and then
Mhm.
extending and recognizing that same struggle in others rather than recognizing the struggle in others first,
Right.
and then trying to sort of revive that or recall a time when you felt the same way. So it's like interesting use of the word, because I hadn't thought, as you said, we talked about this in other conversations around other books, and hadn't thought about it as empathy specifically. I guess because of that sort of like reverse
Mhm.
nature. Just a comment.
Cool. I do like a good comment. All right. Let's see. Then and then ultimately I would say where she boils down the second method, right, of using these poisons as medicine. We use everything that happens to us as a means for waking up, right? Every incident that occurs to us, everything that goes on, whether it's traumatic, whether it's joyful, we can use it to cultivate um, our opportunities for the waking up, you know. And I think when you can start to see it that way, that's important. Um, in my mind, I personally call it being opportunistic. Um, I think of it like just being ready for whatever. Easier said
Me,
than done a lot.
for me, it comes across as being grateful,
Yeah.
even if it is suffering, even if it is pain. There's a Rumi quote: the cure for pain is in the pain," and it's the same principle.
Mhm.
You know, you get bit by a snake, well, you need to use the venom to treat the venom,
Mhm.
and same thing here. You start suffering, well, you have to look at the suffering, understand it, because I mean, as with emotion, suffering, at least in my experience, is more useful as a messenger than anything else, but no one really knows how to listen to it because it's so terrifying. It's so unpleasant. You want to get away from it as fast as possible so you can't hear what it's saying.
Mhm.
But if you just take a breath and sit with it and let it sit with you, it transforms because the entire time you're trying to get away from it, you're seeing it as something other than it is. You're seeing it as you think it is.
Mhm.
And we're all very bad at being able to accurately predict what things are.
What?
So
I am
Of
offended.
course.
How dare?
It's true, though.
you become familiar with it to the
Mhm.
point that it's like an exposure therapy, such
Mhm.
that you don't become afraid when you feel it arise. And at least for me, years ago, I was deep in the practice of this, and I would feel suffering arise and I would feel grateful because it showed me a new area that I could work on, something that was still stuck in my craw, as it were.
Mhm.
because it's definitely something that you can transform into wisdom and peace, but it has to be done with courage. And that is the hardest fucking part, is just developing the courage to look it down and say, all right, friend, let's chat.
Mhm.
It's
Why
also
would you
pretty.
do that? It's so scary.
It is. It is scary. It's like you're willingly putting your foot in lava. You're like, it's something that I personally find quite difficult is maintaining mindfulness, and sometimes because like maintaining it constantly is something I currently can't do. Maybe one day, eh? But someone comes up to you and says X, Y, and Z, or something happens in your life and it's upsetting in some way. Those knee-jerk reactions, the the well, I don't know. Why not to swear in this stream? I don't know. But anyway, you get the tone. Oh no, I really don't like this, and the immediate reaction is this person has peed me off, and I'm gonna shout at them, or I'm gonna do this or that or the other. And in those moments, it's very hard to sit there and learn from it because you're too busy like diving in the other way. You know, you've got the sense in which Max was saying, which is diving, get to know it, what's actually going on. And you've got the other way, which is I'm already in it, I'm swimming in it, I know what's going on, and I'm really mad at you.
Right, right. However, I mean, it's almost impossible to break out of it when you're in it like that, because it's sort of, it like takes you over, right? It sort of fills you with this feeling of whatever it is, whether it's righteous indignation or just sorrow or whatever. You lose your sense of self to this thing, this feeling experience. You you sort of become diminished, but at the same time, like, you don't feel that way. You feel like you're alive finally or something, because there's some sort of motivator that keeps that cycle going, right? And it's so hard to essentially train yourself, to stop engaging in that. And it's sort of a work your way from the back towards the front situation. At least for me, it was when I was dealing with anger. It's the same kind of thing you were talking about, of, you feel the anger come up, and then it's like, well, now I am anger, and so I will let everyone know how angry I am. But after the fact, you look back on yourself and you say, oh dang, that was uncool. I don't know why I did that. And then you do it again and again and again until you learn in the moment to say, hold on, wait, I've done this enough. I don't have to keep doing this. But then all you can do is catch yourself mid act until eventually you start catching yourself when it starts, when you feel that first twinge of anger. And then eventually, if you continue, you catch it before you even feel that. You catch it when you notice the pattern could happen. But that's such a drawn out process where you see almost no tangible results, and it requires months, if not years, of like constant mindful effort. So it's no wonder to me that you tell someone these kinds of things and they'll look at you like you're talking to them as though they're a monkey. Like, it's it's such a unintuitive process with, we like the big flashy, I click the button, I get $1 million kind of a thing. And this is, I click the button and nothing really happens, although it tells me it's good. I can't believe that. It just says it's good until I hit the button 1,000 times, and then I realize, oh yeah, it is good. That's nice. But up until that 1,000th one, it's like digging for a well. You don't know if there's water there.
The mindfulness is also terribly exhausting. At least
Oh yeah.
the one reassurance I've got for that is in the book, The Three Pillars of Zen. It talks about it, saying first it's going to be really, really draining. Paraphrasing, and then later on it will get easy. I'm like, that would be nice because it's my mindfulness, I guess you could say, is mainly limited by how much I can energetically sustain it. I'll have a
hmm
few days in a row. I'll be on point. I'll be doing everything I need to do, and then I just get so tired, and I just I need a break for a bit. I'm just going to lay in bed for an extra hour, you know.
Yeah. I am told.
Yeah.
I don't know if I believe it, but I am told there is a way to become mindful such that it is effortless. But I believe that only happens once one excuses the idea of self from getting in the way.
I think also there's like this other form of mindfulness that it would be easy to trick yourself into thinking you had reached the effortless version.
Mm-hmm.
um,
I've done that
and
one.
and that's the one where I accidentally exist in a lot because of my like OCD. um, it's like I can feel everything in the room all at once, and
Yeah.
every noise, every like smell, every you know what I mean, and it's all coming in, and I think it would be easy to trick myself into saying, "Look how mindful I am. Look how aware of the moment I am. Like, I am so enlightened."
On top of that, like attention, at least as far as I can see, it doesn't really work like that anyway. You know, if I'm going to focus on what you're saying now, my attention of the road outside this house it's going to start diminishing. I'm not aware of everything that's going on around me. And that's a good thing because I'm concentrating on what you're doing.
Right, and that's the point. Is it's a good thing. You don't want to be in that state.
No. One that got me a lot was so there was the egotistic kind of like, haha, you know, I tricked myself into thinking that I'd sort of found an equanimity. It turned out to be very fragile. And that was an interesting day when that shattered. Um, but there's another one that's caught me a few times, which is you're sitting there and you feel like you're mentally taking a step back from everything. And there's a fault in the logic of it. Because you sit there, you take a step back, and you're like, no, don't take a step back. You're in the middle of all of this. It is happening. If you feel like you're taking a step back, that feeling is another thing to be mindful of. You've just made a new sensation. Congratulations. That one gets me quite a bit.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, this has become venting about mindfulness session.
Good. Good. The third method for working with chaos is to regard whatever arises as the manifestation of awakened energy. This is the one I was like, I haven't really thought about this or considered it or had words for it. The other two, I kind of felt like I'd been introduced to these concepts at some point in my research. Um, but this one was like, um, he, she gets into like this real sad story about death, and it's like I get it, but like, oh my god. And she talks about vultures waiting for a body, and it's crazy. Um, so I highlighted often in our daily lives we panic. We feel heart palpitations and stomach rumblings because we are arguing with someone or because we had a beautiful plan and it's not working out. How do we walk into those dramas? Which,
That's interesting. How do we walk into them? Not how do we walk out of them. Not
yeah.
how do we survive them. How do we like actively go for it?
Mhm. How do we deal with those demons, the hopes, the fears, all of that? And then I highlighted we're trying to learn not to split ourselves between our good side and our bad side, which I think is a really good point because I think even the most earnest practitioner is probably going to be labeling things good and bad. It's a bad habit. Haha. Haha.
I certainly do it.
It is a habit that we have to try and label things immediately as good or bad. And
It's
so,
so hard to get over labels because it's
mhm,
just such a useful, like, linguistic convention.
mhm,
It's
absolutely.
ingrained, you know?
Yeah,
To try and, like, separate conceptually versus conventionally is, as Artemis was saying, it's a lot of work to try and just keep that going because damn, I don't have an easy time uh looking at, I don't know, a speaker and not immediately thinking, ah, a speaker.
there's nothing wrong with that. This. You look at it. What are you experiencing? The notion of there's a thought and there's a speaker. You know, there's something going on. You don't have to suddenly change your senses and make them magically go if ethereal. There's a cup of tea next to me. In the grand scheme of things, sure you could say there's a series of atoms, and you could go on and on and on in different layers of analysis, like including sort of like Dhammakaya style things. But
Right, but I
ultimately,
don't I
I
don't
am
mean switch.
seeing that tea.
Right, I don't mean switch one hat for another. Don't call it a group of atoms rather than tea. I
Mhm.
mean, just what is it? And then you drink it. That's what it is. Like there's no, you don't have to call it anything.
It's
What is
very
the speaker?
useful,
It's
though.
sound that comes out. Conventionally, yes, to be able to communicate, you have to do that. It's just for my internal thoughts, for my own processes, I don't
Mm-hmm.
need to categorize these things. I can see them and know what they are without saying it is this word or it is this thing. Because by thingifying it, I am, in a sense, removing it from the whole. I'm making it its own individual instance.
Mm-hmm.
And while on its own, that might not be a problem, it creates a pattern which then becomes a problem when we get to things like, well, what am I?
Mm-hmm. Well, if it works for you, then good.
I mean, ideally, right? Um, there've been passages which say, uh, don't put a name to it, just let it be what it is, that kind of a thing. That's essentially what I'm aiming at.
Yeah, it sounds useful. The ability to talk about cups when you need to talk about cups, and then
Right,
not when you don't need to talk about cups.
exactly, exactly. Everything in its own time.
yeah.
You don't have to put frills or bells or whistles or whatever.
I like
Hmm.
them though.
Me too. You know,
I like my bells and whistles. They're cool and pretty and make nice sounds.
Lee, it sounded like you were gonna say something.
Oh, it went in a completely different direction.
Ah.
take
I mean,
us, eat
I
us.
was saying the is specifically saying, oh, bad habits or do, that doing a certain thing is a bad way to do things or a good way.
Mhm.
Usually, I think, I mean, sometimes there's a judgment there, but
Mhm.
I think often we just use that as a shorthand. It's not that we're actually saying necessarily the thing is bad, but something that's a slightly more elaborate, this repeated activity, this habit that we have is not really getting me closer to certain
Mhm.
goals, or it's in one
Mhm.
way or another, it's making me feel worse. It's making my health worse. It's making me less successful at, whatever other endeavor. And then we just kind of sum it up as a bad habit
Mhm.
because you don't necessarily need to describe in every instance every way that a particular activity is detrimental to the life that you're trying to lead. And
No, no.
but so we
People
do
love
that
it when you do
anyway.
that all the time with every conversation.
I elaborate on every single. And sometimes it's might be, useful to say I have been doing X thing and I should instead do this if I want to, very specifically.
Mhm.
But if we're not really talking about the bad habit, and maybe we're talking about, oh, how is your, how are things going for you lately, or you know, the focus isn't that. We don't really need to. elaborate on every single bad habit. We can just say bad habits. And
Bad
it's,
habits lead to
again,
late
yeah, I guess
nights and
utility. There's a utility to it, but there's also a difference between actually thinking that the thing is
Mhm.
bad in the sense of like evil
Yeah, absolutely
versus.
agree. It's like the difference between, like, I don't know, I ordered Chinese food a few days ago. There's like, it's not a bad thing. Like, it's not bad, but was it? Did it come from a delusional mindset, or did it come from thinking I'd be happy when I had the food? It's much easier to say it was a bad idea.
Yeah, it's convenience, not necessarily that it's the most accurate thing we could say. And then if we're talking here, like good side, bad side, where we're putting judgments on some part of ourself, what ultimately, I guess her point's just accepting how you exist, and then we can choose to not do certain things, but we can't change certain core elements. And instead of feeling badly about it, or as she said, splitting in that quote that you highlighted here, if we see for what it is without the, I mean, I guess I always think of anything that somebody does, it's not just that in itself, it's coming from something deeper that isn't inherently bad. So they could do something awful that harms a lot of people, or you know.
Well, yeah,
But
let's look at this conversation now. Nazi Germany, yeah, makes the Enigma machine, which leads Alan Turing to come up with the first version of a computer, which leads to the internet, which leads to Zoom sangers.
Thanks, Nazis.
Yeah, like slightly facetiously, but yeah, it's also like we're looking at. We've got to be careful not to fool ourselves as well, because okay, we could stop using the word good and bad, and we could say wholesome and unwholesome, but we're still expressing our preference. After all, we're here as Buddhists, so there's certainly a modality of living that we have said is better that we're trying to get to.
mm-hmm.
And even if it's just accepting things as they are right now, we're still we've still made a value judgment. That's the whole damn point.
But it's not saying you can't make any value judgments about any things. It's
No,
just
no, no, no. I
what
don't
you're
mean that.
judging, right? Like, and I'm
Yeah.
also, for as far as examples of the technology, what I meant more was when somebody is, for example, think of a good one. If somebody does something bad because, like, something that's harmful or immoral in some way that they're doing because they maybe want attention and praise from other people,
Mm-hmm.
but it's sort of fabricated. It's based on a lie, some kind of fraud, whatever. And that we could say, oh well, this is not a good behavior and it's caused harm and whatever. It's a bad thing. But
Mm-hmm.
at the root of that action, at the root of that behavior, it's maybe stemming from the same core trait that makes that person also do really nice things for other people and makes them generous and that if they
Mm-hmm.
maybe they find joy in like spreading joy to others, and sometimes they're choosing bad methods to do that because they're, I don't know, stealing from people or making like somehow false about it, or I don't know. It's a
Yeah.
conversation I'd had with somebody at one point, so this is an example that comes up that may or may not make sense out of context without all the specifics, but if at the core, at the root of both a positive expression and a negative expression is this core, like something in the personality. And rather than seeing them as distinct, like a good side and a bad side, it's just different manifestations of something that doesn't have really a positive or negative. It just kind of is. It's just how that person is, and they're maybe doing, like, choosing better or worse ways to express that or to try to get a need met that centers around it, but ultimately it's not like a, oh, they're just horrible. I mean, you can take any politician too,
Mm-hmm.
why they're doing the things that they're doing, that with a lot of corruption and a system that isn't working well and hasn't been designed, the best way. But at the core of all the people, it's not just like they were born evil. They have something else underneath that, and we probably only get to see one side of it. We don't really see the other side. But somewhere underneath it all is some kind of something that doesn't have a judgment attached to it. They've just kind of chosen a lot of these bad behaviors.
Yeah, well, maybe even something like, if I understand what you're saying, someone could really care deeply about others and therefore get really angry and shout at somebody who's hurting them and is being aggressive and violent towards someone because they care about someone else.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be that the aggression and violence is. I mean, those things we could say are bad, but whatever that's coming from, and maybe they're also a very passionate person or very expressive person. There's nothing like inherently bad or good about either of those things. It's just depending on how it sort of comes out. And they can learn to control that better, and they can choose not to do those particular things and still be that person underneath it. But in terms of practice
Mm-hmm.
here, to not pretend that that doesn't exist underneath it all, and notice that there is a difference between the person who sometimes does bad things
Mm-hmm.
and then the bad things themselves.
Thich Nhat Hanh actually talks about something fairly similar. Talks about, they call them wholesome and unwholesome seeds in the English translations I've read. And you've got, you're born with this and raised with whatever your circumstances are, and eventually, as you start to grow old enough to have some more self-awareness, you have a bunch of seeds, and some of them sort of sprout into good tendencies, some of them sprout into less helpful tendencies, and you can't really help what seeds you've got at that point. It's like, which ones are you going to water?
Yes. I like that image.
Yeah.
Thich Nhat Hanh's wonderful.
Oops. I do like Thich Nhat Hanh. We just finished a book by him not too long ago.
The Heart of the Buddha's Teaching.
Yeah, we did The Heart of the Buddha's Teaching. That was fun.
Oh, it's wonderful, yes.
Wonderful thing.
So, in chapter 20, it's called The Trick of Choicelessness, which was an interesting title, and then progressed into a fairly interesting concept. It discusses two major things that bled into each other, which was the Samaya bond, Samaya, and then the sense of choicelessness, or not the sense of the fact of choicelessness, and the trick that the bond actually is. So it was interesting to me because I'm being introduced, for me reading this chapter is being introduced simultaneously to the concept of what is this bond. I hadn't really heard about it, hadn't read about it, hadn't learned about it. And it's a special like teacher student bond that is like, I will support you to the ends of the earth and back, sort of loyalty and all of that. And then also the fact that the choosing of that bond is not a choice, but also that I don't know, I didn't fully, I think I need to sit with this chapter longer to really get what she was trying to say. Because then she jumps into these ideas of like we have to stop thinking that we can get away and settle down somewhere else. Instead, we could just relax with exhaustion, indigestion, insomnia, irritation, delight, whatever. And then she gets a little bit more into awareness of the moment. We kind of mentioned that earlier. We all know what sounds are like when they punctuate and startle, but what does your pen sound like writing in your notebook? Um, that's one of those things where I struggle very hard with that balance of I'm very aware of what my pen sounds like writing in my notebook.
Oh
but
no.
but not for good reasons. You know what I mean? Like um and so it's just learning these balance of letting things in but not giving them the power to overwhelm me so that I can experience mindfulness and not overstimulation.
Yeah, because there's a certain like prudence of action. If you can be as mindful as you like, if having that pen scratching on there is going to make you just go, okay, brain can't process things now, even without saying it's good or bad. You just
Mhm.
go. It would be prudent to put some ear defenders in or whatever, or get a nicer pen. I don't know.
Yeah, it would be in your best interest to get rid of that pen and get a better one. Have you
Yeah.
considered not that pen?
Well, like yeah, and even if you imagine, I don't know, the holiest of holy monastics who's sat there and they have the same experience, they are best able to serve the community if their brain has not been melted by a scratchy pen sound. Whether they like it or not, whether they care, their cognitive capacity just goes plop. So
Bloop.
there's still reasons to maybe avoid is a strong word, or but there's still reasons to take an experience and say, okay, we're going to try and mold it in a certain way,
Yeah.
even if you're not kind of attached to because like I'm like ridiculously autistic, as probably already know, um, and certain noises. I can be chill as anything, but that's it. I can't read for the rest of the day. That's it's. I can't go and do anything. I might as well I just have to kind of lie down and wait.
Mhm.
So it would be better for me to study Dharma, if you like, as an example, or
Mhm.
whatever. But I can't do that because the washing machine makes a really high pitched squealing noise when it's turned on, is one of them. I've preserved my hearing, but it's caused me more problems.
We could say that at the level of mind, breaking Samaya is feeling that we must come up with a solution to a problem, or feeling that there is a solution or a problem at all. That might give you some idea of how difficult it is to keep Samaya. Because it's not just the bond, but it starts. Because it sounds like this word is used a little differently depending on the practice, or not the practice, the school of thought. Sorry. The school of thoughts seem to use this word for slightly different purposes. Or perhaps I am not fully aware of how it is a one thought meant to develop and evolve into its true form, like a Pokemon. Um,
I have just looked it up for my own sake because I don't know the word, and there are four different definitions of it that are relevant here.
Perfect. Okay.
Um, I'll give you. In fact, I'll just read ad verbatim because it's not too long. Samaya is a set of vows or precepts given to initiates of Vajrayana Buddhism as part of a certain ceremony that creates a bond between the guru and the disciple. However, it may also be defined as a particular system of teachings or doctrines, conduct required of a tantric practitioner, such as vows or commitments,
Mhm.
the realization of Buddhahood, and in Tantric Buddhism, union with the Trikaya, body, speech, and mind of the Buddha. So, I guess in that context, you could talk about breaking the precepts. Why are you doing it? There's something that's bothering you, that, for example, and you're like, oh, this person's annoying me, I'm going to shadow them. Something simpler, like not engaging in a pleasure, and like, okay, so you weren't satisfied as you were? Maybe that's how one could read it.
Mm-hmm. According to a famous quote, the student of Vajrayana Buddhism should always be in a state of panic.
We're great students.
I am so good. Ah, I'm so good at this, guys. Oh.
There's something that almost invokes panic that's sometimes read at the end of the Soto Zen Sangha that I go to, which is something along the lines of time is short, do not squander, get on with it. Like, to completely paraphrase it. It's like, don't want urgency. There's a sense of urgency here. Your life is very short. Do not squander it. It's like, okay, I'm just trying to exist here. I'm just trying to work out how to exist and in a way that is semi okay. Maybe that's the panic.
Mm-hmm.
It certainly evokes it.
Everything is the panic.
Yeah, because like I'm 30 now, and when you when I'm 30, I'm thinking, oh, I wish I'd done this thing when I was 25, and I should get doing it now. And oh, I haven't done it when I was 25, and there's this sense of, oh, I'm too old. Oh, now I've missed some time on doing these things, and I'm going to think that next year as well. Like it's not really.
Right.
It's perhaps it's useful. Maybe that's the point. It's useful because there's a little proverbial whip chasing me around. Like, come on! You've got no time left to work to sit and chill anymore. You need to get on with this, or you'll be dead. Well, you will be dead, but you'll be dead before you actually get to do any good with it.
I do frequently think about like what will me in 5 or 10 years wish I had been doing now.
And why am I not doing it?
And why am I not doing it? And so it has inspired certain ventures. Um, and sometimes it's like, well, I should have started that before, but I can't do that. So I guess I'll start now.
It's
and
never good enough either, is it?
It's not. And I think also sometimes there's value in letting go of an idea too. If I've like married myself too tightly of this idea of something I need to be doing because that means finally I'll be good enough or I'll finally be interesting enough or whatever end goal I think it'll mean for me as a person or my social standing. I think sometimes we can take those goals and learn to let them go in the same way that we must let go of emotions and during meditation.
Absolutely.
You know, they come, these flights of fancy, these dreams, they come and we have to breathe them in, but then we also have to breathe them out, right? We can't hold our breath. And they're
Yeah.
not meant to be held the same way as other things that come and go in our life. And when I'm doing very well, this works great for me. I am not always doing well.
Yeah, it's always like that. Sometimes when we screw things up, in some respect, we're looking at the world from like I don't know, whatever standards we're used to adhering to, and say I don't know, say we lose our jobs or say we can't pay our rent, and like oh no, I fucked this up again. We might have to beat that one out. I don't know. The you can look at this and go, actually, says who? This is absolutely fine. Yeah, especially if you want like an external reference point, you go back and look at maybe people we admire or we admire the works of them, philosophers or great teachers or whatever, and you look at them. It's like yeah, their life was a series of just tripping over, face planting in the floor, but then just being like this is fine and carrying on. And it's who's imposing this idea of we need to prove ourselves to someone else. It's only us. And then it's still really hard to not try and get validation. Like, one that I had to sit with for a while before going into a particular Sangha was, I know I would like to teach formally Zen someday. Cool, fine. it's like because when I was talking to the sensei, they're like, pretty good goal, pretty good goal. But the question I had to sit with myself, sit with and look at was why? Why do I want to feel like I've made it? Do I want to feel like I've achieved something? Do I want to go through a system where someone says at the end of it, okay, you've understood it now, you're good, you off you go. When I
You did
sit and
it.
do koan practice, they say, look, do they sit and say, well, hey, you've done the koan? No, they do not. No, they absolutely do not. With me, anyway. Maybe they're insightful and they know it's a bad idea. They sit and let me squirm for a while and go, no. Why am I looking for someone else to tell me that I've got finally understood things and got it? There is
Right.
one good route of that, which is, we can get ahead of ourselves. We can think we know things that we don't.
Mhm.
We could be harmful. But there's also the, if you've understood things well enough, maybe you don't need someone else to tell you that.
Mhm.
That's the hard sort of paradoxical dichotomy, you know, keeping ourselves in check, but also not keeping ourselves in the check of others that needn't. What my mother thinks of what I've done in life is irrelevant, etc.
Yeah.
High five.
Um, what I think is really good point also is where she talks about that this part of the practice also means not preparing an escape route. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like giving, if you're really pursuing the practice, and I think even as you pursue Zen, if there's any amount of you in the background going, well, I have this other option if that doesn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Then you've
Yeah,
prepared an escape route.
yeah. It's like,
And,
look, are you doing this or not?
mm-hmm. Now, am I applying that correctly? I think so, but I'm not 100%. So, grain of salt on that. But that's sort of what I get from it a little bit right now
Mm-hmm.
is that oftentimes we try to pursue these things, and even with meditation, I think I do this, right? Like, I can
Mm-hmm.
stop meditating at any moment I want if something gets too scary, right? Instead of really embracing whatever comes up. And
Yeah, like
so,
the proverbial Buddha, just like I ain't leaving this tree.
mhm. And so I think that I am absolutely guilty of creating escape routes all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I've always got a plan B.
At least you know it though, and that's a good start.
Y'all not showing up for book club? That's okay. I got like 3 projects I can go work on right now. like,
I'm
I
afraid
always
you're
got
stuck with this.
always got something else I can be doing. And that's not always good. That's not always bad. It just I like you said, it's good I'm aware of it, but then I don't always know where to go next with my awareness. Like, I'm aware of this thing I'm doing. Cool. Now what? Which is my problem with therapy. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
um, so she says it's a process. We'll have a habit of running away because it's very deep seated. And we have to experiment with the trick. We use Samaya as a trick of binding ourselves so that we can't use our escape routes. We can't do X, Y, Z. And so this formal bond becomes this unconditional relationship with a crocodile, I guess. She's using an analogy. She's calling it learning to trust a crocodile because she was talking to it was really interesting because so her official like mentor teacher person and who she quotes a lot is Trungpa Rinpoche. Um, and so she apparently didn't even super like the guy to begin with, but she did move her whole life to get closer so she could be near his teachings, which was fascinating. And she likens it to learning how to trust to put your head in the jaws of a crocodile
Mm-hmm.
because that crocodile is the trick. It's all very circular. It's like it's a trick that you're got this relationship because in the end it's not it should be choiceless. She says, when I say that Samaya is a trick, I mean that it tricks us into realizing that our relationship with the phenomenal world has always been choiceless. And it's just a lot of thought
Yeah,
put on here. I'm gonna
that's got a
stop.
deep thing.
All right.
It's kind of like a gym instructor, isn't it?
Mhm.
Apparently, a lot of people do better just having someone to hold themselves accountable to, whether the instructions were good or not. Just having to go back and tell your instructor, "Oh, I didn't actually do the thing you told me to," is enough to get them to do it.
Mhm.
Maybe that bond is helpful in the same way.
Max Lee, any thoughts?
It is helpful.
Max has spoken.
Perfect.
I've never had uh, a proper teacher like that,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know if something like that would be useful for me specifically.
Mhm.
But I also know that I'm somewhat atypical when it comes to most uh, minds. So I feel like for the typical person, that would be wonderfully helpful as long as you've got someone who's like knows what they're talking about, right? You don't want to just go up to some schmuck and say, "Hey, you know, help me get better," and they just say, "Oh, good, give me money." That's not the point. Um, but it is interesting that you know having this somewhat not necessarily combative, but like uh, an unsurety, a recognition that there's something here that's rubbing me the wrong way, and getting closer to that each time. It's still falling in line with the whole thing we've been talking about of you know using the poison to cure the poison. It's like this doesn't feel right. Why doesn't it feel right? What's with that? What am I missing?
Mhm.
I used to think that I particularly didn't need a teacher. Then I met a good one. They
That's what
they
I want to
tore me
do.
to pieces.
I want that experience. I just haven't had the opportunity.
Seek it out. Like there's countless sanghas on the internet, and it takes the right efforts. But you're gonna do it
Much like I have just acquired a cat, I expect the right teacher to just walk into my house.
exactly.
I know that'll never
Which is
happen. I
which
know it
is
won't.
that's how I got a cat this weekend.
But it's also like okay. This is going to be a random excerpt of Artemis's experience with three different teachers. Teacher one talks to me 5 minutes. I have an absolute existential crisis and never speak to them again. Teacher
Fair.
two was they were so helpful. Absolutely, they were part of Plum Village. Really, really helpful, and they are the only reason I've managed to. Well, they were a significant reason. Without an equivalent of them, I wouldn't have been spurred on because I needed
Mhm.
my, let's call it, false equanimity to be shattered.
Mm.
Um, Another teacher later on helped me out. I came to them with a very specific problem. I have problems in social situations when it comes to not just the autistic sense, but maintaining some kind of mindfulness in them, and just asked for some help with that. Very helpful. I attended for a while. I didn't see that I was getting much out of the Sangha sessions. So I kind of stopped going. Eventually, I come along to another one, and this is the Sangha I now attend. And I sit there, and I'm in the right state of mind. I had to be ready to go to the Sangha, yeah? And I had to be ready to go and speak to the teachers at this Sangha. And a
Mhm.
big part of the problem for a long time is I just wasn't, not in the value judgment sense, but I just wasn't in a good enough state to do it. Um, and now, being sat there, and you realize, okay, you've now got to make yourself maintain it. And to get that relationship with the teacher, you need to go and do this thing again and again and again. And I have a terrible, terrible time with doing anything reliably. Like, you've seen me enter and leave this Sangha how many times? Like, I go in somewhere, someone will pee me off, I'll leave, I'll come back. That's the cycle for me, gong. But
Very good.
the this particular Sanghas, they were all good Sanghas, to be clear. I just found myself in one that kind of matched where I was on the day I went in. Has been beautifully kind to me, and it's strangely like fluke. Every time I go to have an interview, they mix and match their teachers who are training, teachers who are this, teachers who are. I've almost got a different one every time, but they carry on the thing that the last one did. It's really valuable, and making yourself go, I would definitely encourage it, because I guess if I were to talk to my past self, the opportunity is there. You know that they will be helpful. So why aren't you going?
Yep,
And
that's
that's
good to
hard.
hear.
So sitting with that was what eventually led me to the thing that was a little bit off the start of this recording, I think. That book I mentioned earlier, The Being Mortal, it talks about, just to quote it now where actually everyone's here, what's more important to you, your hopes or your fears? And for me, it was, oh, what if they don't like me? What if they aren't helpful to me? What if they aren't this? What if they aren't that? What if it's bad in this way? What if it's about, screw it, I'm just going to go anyway and get what I can out of it. And it's, the to end this mini ramble, I would never. At the last Sangha session, there was a small talk at the very beginning, which is unusual because normally we sit for half an hour in whatever our practice is, do some walking meditation, half an hour in whatever our practice is, and then we have a talk. They said to me right at the beginning. So I want to encourage everybody to go and have an interview with Sensei. Wouldn't normally say this. I asked Sensei whether, this was a good idea to say, whether they're okay with me saying this. This is one of the, what I assume was more junior teachers. And apparently the Sensei said, yeah, the people who don't go are normally the ones that need it.
Hmm.
And that someone was me.
Yeah, that sounds right. See, everything you're saying, it's very interesting. I feel the stirrings of aversion, and I can't pinpoint why. I
Good.
don't I don't feel like I'm afraid of judgment. I don't feel like I've got some sort of standard I don't think they'll meet. It's it's unnamed. I can't pinpoint it. I know it's there.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know what it is.
Is it the
And I suppose
ADHD brain? You can't tell me what to do.
Yeah. Land
maybe. I mean,
avoidance.
it could just be that simple.
And
Um,
yet, what if you anyway?
right. I think ultimately I don't think the why matters.
Yeah.
Uh, oh God. Well, there is that issue of the ADHD. Okay, well now I have to go and actually do it though.
Yeah.
And that
It's hard.
okay, so this is gonna take me a while, I think, to work up to it, but you have motivated me.
Yay!
I'm going to start this process. However, as we were just discussing, it's better to have someone there to try and keep you accountable, and I don't want to try and make that anyone's responsibility here. However, I will encourage you to encourage me if you feel like doing so.
I think that's one of the healthiest things I've ever heard you say.
Well,
Yes.
thank you.
I'm very pleased. You've made my day.
It's a bit of a funny comment. I I don't know if that was intentional or not, with that slight pause. Like, that's the healthiest thing I've ever heard you say, and then the. Does it mean the other things were really unhealthy? Or is it just really being excited about this one good thing?
It's the latter.
Oh.
But, yes. Oh, me and Max have argued. Oh, me and Max have a history. We've had some fallings out. But no, I genuinely mean this. It's not got an undertone of because you're a moron or whatever else might be implied. It's not got any of that in it. At least that's not the intention.